When word comes out that a game is canceled, it can be disappointing, sure. But what happens when a studio just chooses to never acknowledge a game that was in development and its cancellation? Maybe the studio shut down and the PR team was let go before a statement could be made, or maybe even weirder things come up. And that brings us to the topic of today's video, games that mysteriously vanished during development, or Vaporware games. Let's look at an example here. I think we need to talk about the Grand Theft Auto killer game 2 Days to Vegas. Yes, back in the early 2000s, where Grand Theft Auto was taking the world by storm, some other development studios were like, hey, we can do this, but maybe even better. And that's what the game 2 Days to Vegas was setting up to do. And it was definitely something. I don't know what it was. Okay, so 2 Days to Vegas is interesting because it was allegedly an open world story-driven crime game that had a bunch of action elements, and there was going to be vehicles and a really exciting narrative. Like, there was going to be a really big emphasis on story-driven missions that were really cinematic, and this whole story in the game would take across 48 hours. And while Grand Theft Auto might have had one big city, this game was set up to potentially have multiple cities, like New York, Las Vegas, maybe some other little cities in there sprinkled in as well, allegedly. And the reason I keep saying allegedly is because there wasn't a whole lot of information out there anymore after like various little snippets of interviews, press statements, and screenshot reveals of the game. What we do know about this game is that development started in 2003. That's about it. The studio that was developing the game was known as Steel Monkeys. At one point, this studio had offices in Scotland, Canada, and their main office was in Belarus, Russia. And while they didn't have a long list of games, they did have a few interesting games under their belt. They did Spy Hunter Nowhere to Run, oh boy. And they also did Rocky, the video game for the PS2 and Xbox Original and GameCube. They also had a Bob the Builder game that they worked on. They were proud of that one. So obviously, they were the best candidate to finally make a GTA killer, something that potentially could dethrone GTA in itself. And the development for this game is actually wild when you look at the timeline, like you zoom out a little. If development started in 2003, and then with all of the development updates or lack thereof that we had over the years, it seems like this game had its development span potentially 3 different console generations. With the development starting in 2003, probably for the original Xbox and PlayStation 2, and then later moving to the next gen with the Xbox 360 and the PS3, in 2006, the studio was still actively working on the game. They talked about how they had different tech for the game, and I did find a little bit of discussion online about Steel Monkeys closing one of their studios and then development shifting to their main Belarus studio. Nonetheless, things were still potentially moving along, as in 2007, new screenshots of the game would be released, and these screenshots were apparently rendered in-engine. They weren't like pre-rendered screenshots. Now, you would think after 5 years of development, you might start to wonder if the game ever will release, but in 2008, at the PlayStation Universe show, more screenshots of the game were shown off, meaning the game was potentially still on track to be released. I mean, it's a wild attempt with GTA 4 being kind of prominent around this time, but hey, they've been cooking for 5 years. Maybe what they cooked up could have been big enough to dethrone Grand Theft Auto? Probably not. After the PlayStation Universe gameplay showcase, I guess, they talked a little bit about the game, what they worked on development-wise to have like the cities be cool and how they were working on motion capture systems and whatnot. There wasn't too many more updates. In 2009, IGN apparently confirmed that the game was still in active development, and then there was nothing. A lot of people speculated the game was silently canceled, but then randomly out of the blue, some more updates about the game just kind of surfaced, where in 2012, the studio announced that they were nearly done with a big title that they had been working on, and they were looking for beta testers to test out the game. So potentially at this point in 2012, the game could be close to finished, but there wasn't anything. Now, by 2013, there was still nothing about the game, and there was some more speculation that happened, and there was a lot of hearsay also. There was some discussion from someone who claimed to have spoken to someone who worked at Steel Monkeys, who reportedly said that the game wasn't really canceled, but investors found the game too risky, but the development studio was still trying to find a way to release the game, but that was about it. There was never anything officially announced or revealed later on. I looked into their website and I tried to use the Wayback Machine to get an idea of like the timeline of all this. And it seemed like somewhere along the line, they overhauled their website, and you can actually see even as of 2015, the game was still listed on their website as something under their belt that they were working on. It even had like in development with it for a little while. So there was something here. They were working on something. It had the under construction tab, whatever that means for the development phase of the game, but it was definitely doomed years ago. Maybe? I'm not too sure, to tell you the truth. What we do know, based off of different interviews, is we would have gotten to play as a character named Vinny, who was an ex-convict, and there was going to be a bunch of like mob involved in the game, and he's trying to help his brother get out of gambling debts, and then you would journey across the US. Kind of like a crime road trip, maybe. Interesting. I don't know. On one front, it would have been cool to see a Grand Theft Auto styled game where you go to multiple cities, kind of like the old Driver games, but not looking polygonal like this. But that would kind of be it. I tried to look into what else happened to Steel Monkeys. They released some Gladiator game, and then that was kind of it. And it was a mobile game. So yeah, weird story overall for a game that was talked about way back in the early 2000s as a potential Grand Theft Auto killer that just vanished. No official announcement. It's just gone. Maybe it'll come out one day. Maybe I'm the one that's wrong about this. I mean, imagine if this dropped before GTA 6.
In 2013, Capcom announced a game called Deep Down for the PlayStation 4. This was a 4-player co-op multiplayer dungeon crawler that was going to play similarly to Dragon's Dogma, another Capcom franchise. Deep Down was going to be the first game to use the new Panther Ray engine, which was a new engine they were developing at the time, and this was going to be the future engine for most Capcom titles. What was cool also that the game was taking place in 2094, and then you get ported back into like the fantasy stuff. It kind of sounds like it was going to be like, you know, how they go back into the memory of Assassin's Creed and, you know, see like historical stuff, but like more like not the memories, they actually get ported back or something. I don't know, it was going to be like some time travel stuff, which I mean, that sounds pretty cool. Plus, legendary video game producer Yoshinori Ono was also involved in this project, and he worked on a lot of projects over the years like Street Fighter, Resident Evil, Devil May Cry, and a lot of Capcom titles. On top of all that, this game was also gonna be a free-to-play title, and an open beta was announced in Japan. And the gameplay they showed off in 2013 also didn't look all that bad. It looked like a pretty polished game already at the time. Now, 2014 came by, and I don't think that beta ever happened. I couldn't find definitive information, but I don't think it did. And nonetheless, the information surrounding this game began slowing down heavily. During a 2015 interview, Yoshinori Ono was asked about Deep Down, and his response basically came down to them needing a little bit more time for Deep Down, and that the game is still in development and they're still working on it. He also said that the online part is taking them a little longer, and they're gonna try to change the game up a little bit as well so they can attract more customers. He didn't directly say what this means, but it probably sounded like they were shifting focus on what the game was gonna be a little bit. But after that, it took another couple years before any news broke on this game, when in 2018 the trademark was extended. But then in 2019, Yoshinori Ono, during an interview, basically said that the game is still happening, kind of, but the original team is no longer together at this point, which sounds like they indefinitely shelved the project. But there was also reports in the same year that the game was near completion, so something doesn't line up here. But in 2020, Yoshinori would actually end up leaving Capcom, which made it even harder to get any information on Deep Down, because now the main guy that's developing the game isn't even at the company anymore. And 1 year later, when Jason Schreier got to do an interview with a chairman at Sony, he would ask about Deep Down, and the response he got was that that person had no idea what happened. And that is the last official news I could find on Deep Down. What I think happened with this game is that it was kind of victim of being developed alongside a video game engine. Developing a new engine is a massive undertaking for video game developers, and then developing a game alongside it can also be really hard. Capcom also stopped talking about the Panther Ray engine in 2014, and it seems like they abandoned that project in general. There are speculations that some of it was reused for the RE engine that, you know, the modern games run on now, but there's no real confirmation of this. All we know is that the Panther Ray engine was never really finished. Now, the website is still up in a way. I mean, you can still go to the Japanese Capcom website for this game, but it doesn't display anything, so I don't know what that means. At least they still have the website up, I guess, even though it's just black mostly. And at this point, I would say it's not very likely we'll ever see Deep Down. I mean, there's some people who think that some of it was reused in Dragon's Dogma 2, but I mean, there's no official confirmation of this either. So, I don't know. It seems like this is dead in the water.
Now, not too long ago, we did a whole video on movie scripts that were supposed to be movies, but instead just got turned into video games. And Vin Diesel actually had his own game development studio that worked on Wheelman and a bunch of Riddick video games and Fast and Furious Crossroads. But there was one more game that was listed on the Wikipedia page for Tygon Studios, Vin Diesel's game studio, that is apparently still in development despite the fact that I'm pretty sure the company's defunct. I'm pretty sure nobody's working on this game, but apparently it might still be in development. And this is called Barca BC. Now, we talked a little bit about this studio in our last video, but I'm pretty sure the way that Tygon Studios operates is kind of as like a middle platform. They don't actually have developers in-house. They work under One Race Films, which is Vin Diesel's production company that also hires out people to work on productions. So typically, whenever a game would be developed by Tygon Studios, it was just One Race Films through Tygon Studios hiring another development studio to partner with them, and then they maybe like came up with some ideas. They talked to Vin Diesel about it. Vinny's like, this is a good idea, whatever, but not an actual like development studio, because while they did make a handful of games, there was a period of time where nothing was going on, and then randomly in like 2013 they just reactivated, which was just because they assigned people through One Race Films to reactivate it, and they worked on Fast and Furious Crossroads, which they co-developed alongside Slightly Mad Studios, which came out in 2020. But I'm pretty sure nobody actually like worked on the game's development. Vin Diesel's not there in the office coding a game. Still, this Barca game was announced all the way back in 2006, and I want to zero in on Barca BC. This was Vin Diesel's own MMORPG, which is an insane type of game for Vin Diesel to be behind. Like, not just like an RPG, no, an MMORPG. Like, he's personally making the next World of Warcraft here. I mean, not really, but you know what I'm trying to say. However, sometime later in development, it seemed like maybe they realized that an MMORPG isn't sustainable for this like game studio that so far had just done Wheelman. And while an MMORPG taking place during the Punic Wars of Hannibal Barca sounds like an interesting concept for an MMORPG, the development studio decided to change focus and make the game into a third-person action RTS game. Now, unfortunately, we don't know too much about what the game would have been like. There are some interviews of Vin Diesel talking about how he was working on the game for about 3 years by the time the interview was posted in 2009, and said that the game was still a few years out at that point. So yeah, and that, you got to live life in 200 BC. That was it. That's all we had. But in this 2009 interview, Vin Diesel himself said that the game was his dream game. He also said that they haven't talked about it much because they've been mulling over how to do it just right. Now, he did say that he knows games like this could take a lot of work to create, a lot of funds, and he also said it could probably take another 4 years before we saw the game, but it was something very high on his priority list of games that they're working on. That was the only game left that they were working on at the time until they started the Fast and Furious game years later. But yeah, we never would hear about this game again, though it would never be officially canceled either. So I think ultimately what happened was this idea of doing an MMO game was probably extremely not viable, even with Vin Diesel money. Like, an MMO is expensive to develop. And he also in the interview said where you would have avatars that you would invest. It would be an RPG game, and creating the ancient world as your backdrop, creating an ancient world that is your Azeroth. That is probably my dream scenario. So there you have it. Barca, the video game. Also, while I'm recording this, I'm wondering, should I have been calling it Barca the whole time because of like the geographic location? I don't know. Barca sounds better. I just feel like that's what a lot of people would call it if they saw it in the store, like at GameStop. I'm going to keep calling it Barca. If you watched literally any television in the mid to late 2000s, what we're about to talk about is probably something you haven't even thought about in like the last decade. I guarantee though that some of you are about to have some crazy blast to the past here. Do you guys remember those annoying ringtone commercials that would play multiple times an hour on any channel that you could be potentially watching?
Remember, just text FUN to .ca and subscribe to
Give Boo the little tiger on your cell.
It's actually insane how many people purchased ringtones back in the day. Like, that was a thing. And the company known as Jamba were some of the biggest providers of said ringtones. And they went all out in marketing their services of getting different ringtones and other types of things. And of course, their business practices were kind of controversial too. You see, they marketed their ringtones, wallpapers, text message services heavily across the board on a ton of different television networks. And if you lived in a lot of the countries where you would have experienced this, you might actually remember them under the name Jamster instead of Jamba. It just depends on where you lived. But they were actually pretty shady because while the commercials made it appear that you just bought a ringtone for a couple of dollars or whatever, it actually was a little misleading in the fact that every time you subscribe to one of these, you're actually signing up for a service agreement where they would charge you monthly in your phone bill for whatever service Jamster was providing. On top of that, depending on what channels you regularly watched, these commercials would air pretty aggressively on a lot of different channels that maybe targeted teenagers or even younger people who could have phones. I mean, sure, they might have like the little text that like says all the regulations, but who's actually going to read that? Nonetheless, the popularity of Jamster was so massive, some of their marketing pushes remained relevant long after the ringtone business went under. Do you guys remember that annoying Gummy Bear song? To some of you, I'm sure you think it's fire. That's fine too. While it existed beyond just the ringtone format, a lot of its popularity came from the massive push that Jamba did in marketing this as a potential ringtone you could buy. Similarly, the infamous Crazy Frog also was heavily marketed as a potential ringtone that you could get, which then in turn made that even more popular than just like the more niche meme that it started out as. There were a ton of other attempts to get popular ringtones sold. There were crossovers for other companies, like Family Guy would have a bunch of ringtones you could subscribe for. But honestly, was it a good deal? $1.99 per item typically was the price, and then on top of that, you would be subscribed for anywhere between $9.99 to $12.99 per month, which was billed at like $1.99 to $2.99 a week. And then you had like membership perks, but I think most people didn't even know that they were subscribed to it to even ever redeem their membership perks. Like, you're apparently given a number of credits where you could download certain ringtones and wallpapers per month. But like, what was this monetization method here? Where am I going with this? Well, after this lasted for a little while, there was a lot of controversy and outcry and some lawsuits and a ton of other things. But during all of the hype that Jamster had, they were working on a video game. A game for the PlayStation 2 known as Jamster Allies. This game was originally set to release in 2007 and was going to be an action-adventure game that would not only be on the PS2, but also the PC, and it was being developed by Mercury Games, a studio that, honestly, I really tried to dig to figure out what they worked on, and it only got more confusing the more I looked into it. You see, the game itself was being marketed as being developed by Turtle Games, which was a subsidiary of Mercury Games, but Mercury Games didn't even have a track record of making games themselves. The only game I could find that they developed was Paint by DS, and even then I'm not even sure if they developed it or they published it. And then I followed some other like old archived websites where there's press releases talking about a game called Warriors of the Lost Empire, and they're talking about working on that game and how it's getting ready to release, but then when the game released, their name's nowhere on the game. It's UFO, another studio that made some shovelware games. I don't know what is going on here. That studio worked on a couple of interesting games like the revival of Bubsy a few years ago. Not the new revival of Bubsy happening, but the other one. But I couldn't find too much of this Mercury Games studio, but the big takeaway was that Jamster Allies was a game that was in development. There were screenshots posted, potentially a trailer that has been lost to time, and honestly, the premise alone is just wild in itself. An action-adventure game starring ringtone commercial characters? Okay. And unfortunately, information about this game is very, very scarce, and it has a whole lost media wiki page about it where people have been trying to uncover what the hell this game was. There's this screenshot that has a little bit of information, but it's in such low resolution, people can't even make out what it says most of the time. Someone attempted to like translate the text into like a readable form, and it might a story in the game narrative where the crazy frog has stolen all of the music from the magical musical world, and I'm assuming you have to work with these characters on the box art to unravel the mystery and fix stuff. Now, it seemed like the release date kept getting pushed back. You see, there was a press statement in July talking about how the game was supposed to come out in September, but then, after that release date missed, another article posted saying the game was coming out in November, but then that didn't happen either, and that all lined up in 2007 with the time where Jamster was under a ton of controversy. controversy. Not only were their business practices doing the whole subscription format coming under scrutiny, because I mean, it was pretty shady, to tell you the truth. I knew multiple people who had accidentally signed up for a Jamba subscription not realizing it because they saw the cool commercial with the gummy bear. But you see, just a few months earlier, before all of this happened, Jamster was also running into other controversy involving the Crazy Frog. I'm not making this next part up. You see, in February of 2005, there were a number of complaints to the United Kingdom's Advertising Standards Authority, which complained that Crazy Frog had a visible penis and scrotum, and parents thought that that was inappropriate. I think that, okay, that's wild, and I guess a fair criticism. The complaint also went on to say that the advertisement appeared on television like sometimes twice an hour, even more sometimes showing it more than once in a single commercial break. But actually, the Advertising Standards Authority sided with Jamster, or at least sided against the complaint, saying that the advert was already classified as inappropriate for children television programming because of the premium rate telephone signing up thing that they had. So it was ultimately the broadcaster's decision as to where the advertisement would show and how often that would happen. However, Jamster did go ahead with the controversy and censor Crazy Frog's stuff. And apparently this also happened in Australia. The official Crazy Frog Twitter account even memed on it in 2021. But there was also other complaints that started coming in about the frequency of the Crazy Frog commercials, just driving people insane, I guess. Apparently Jamster had bought 73,000 advertisement spots across television in a single month, which would have been about 2,300 advertisement slots a day. And apparently that meant on average people were seeing the Crazy Frog advert at least 26 times in a single month, with many people seeing it even more than just that. So while the Crazy Frog's penis being visible was totally okay, I guess, by the Advertising Standards Authority in the UK, they did have a problem with the frequency of the Crazy Frog commercial making people go insane. So they actually ruled that the Crazy Frog commercial and their other ringtone advertisements no longer could be shown before 9 p.m. And I don't know, this is just like a goofy era. I wonder how that like held up. I feel like things started like declining in general with Jamster and their ringtones when smartphones started becoming a thing and people realized they didn't need Jamster to download ringtones. Nonetheless, the success of Axel F, the Crazy Frog song, was insane. The fact that it charted in multiple different countries and was certified platinum is just wild. Still, we don't know what happened to Jamster Allies. I don't know. This was a crazy rabbit hole to fall down. I didn't expect to take a long time to talk about it, but here we are. Still, nonetheless, when the release date for the game just flew by, nothing was ever mentioned again. There's been no press statements about what happened to the game. There was no acknowledgement from the studio. I don't really even think the studio ever worked on anything again. It just vanished out of thin air. No talk about it, no discussion. We don't know what happened to the game. There was no official cancellation. There was no unofficial cancellation. We just don't know. It's just gone. And we still are trying to figure out what happened to this game that just vanished. Now, when I was going even further down the rabbit hole for Jamster and Jamba or whatever, I found something really, really bizarre, like a very obscure commercial I couldn't find any context on, but it is a little bit insane. Now, Luke, how long have you been a U.S. citizen for now?
Like a year almost.
Okay, cool. So now I'm going to need your help because we need to find an advertiser-friendly way to talk about something that's going to be in this commercial that involves, you know how like there's clans on Xbox, right?
Oh, yeah.
Now let's think of that word and look at it in the scope of like American history and one that was like pretty awful, but like we probably can't talk about in a video without getting demonetized. Do you kind of know what I'm talking about?
They have like wizards and stuff, right?
Yes. That being said, I'm going to send you this commercial and we're just going to watch it. And then we're going to have to decide later, like what we're going to have to blur. But I think people will be able to figure out what we had to censor based on the context of what we said while also jumping through these hoops.
One day, the people of the world will end their wars and destroy their weapons. The whole world will be united in love and understanding. But there will still be one conflict that divides humanity.
That is insane, dude. That was fucking wild, dude. What the fuck? Did I just watch?
Yeah, so I found that commercial while looking up stuff for this video. I have no idea any context of it, when it aired. I couldn't find any discussion of the video. I only saw 2 mirrored versions of the video online, but apparently that was a commercial that aired. It looked pretty high budget too, which makes me feel like it was like a sporting event, like a Super Bowl or something, but I couldn't find any discussion, no context on it. I couldn't find a single thing about it other than like a few YouTube comments.
You know, and like there was so many offensive things in that, like that was a lot going on, dude. This was crazy, dude.
And I know like we're going way too far into this lost game rabbit hole because these aren't fully relevant, but I feel like they're relevant enough that we need to look at them because, as we mentioned, we were talking about a list of the controversies surrounding Jamster during the time that these commercials were going out, which could have maybe contributed to Jamster Allies getting canceled and evaporating and disappearing. But there was one other controversy during this time that Jamster was also facing, and this one was coming out of Germany directly, as they had a commercial plan for another short animated film that was apparently viral or whatever, that they were trying to get on air, and multiple television stations rejected the commercial. And also there was like a bunch of advocacy groups speaking out against Jamster directly due to this following commercial. Now I'm going to send this one to you too, Luke. This isn't the commercial version. This is the short that they, like the same way how like Crazy Frog was a short first and then they turned it into a commercial, right? This is what the short was that they wanted to air as a commercial for their ringtones. What does that mean?
I'm sitting in my bunker. The world's on fire. Germany is destroyed. Japan is not doing too well either. But one isn't going down. For a bunker, there's still some lights. Did I remember this actually?
You saw this?
I've seen this as a kid. Dude, I remember this. Holy shit.
What is it? What are the lyrics about?
Adolf, you nutty pig, just give up. I do want to point out that the dog is not a German Shepherd. Historically inaccurate, but...
Dang, dude. How could they do that? So this is interesting. There was actually a lot of backlash, which is kind of surprising because it seems like tonally, this is obviously like anti that German leader from World War II that we don't want to get demonetized for saying his name just in case, right? It's like making fun of him, right?
Yeah.
So multiple TV networks ended up boycotting this commercial, and multiple advocacy groups spoke out about it, saying that it's like making fun of that other big, what's a word for like the Holocaust I can use?
I don't know if there's a word, dude. Just said that bad thing he did.
That Holocaust that happened during World War II. Now, what's interesting is Jamba actually made a response saying that the boycott from these TV networks were having little impact on the actual performance of the ringtone through their service. It actually ended up during that time being one of the top 5 most popular downloaded ringtones. So that's interesting. He also went on to say, first we were told it promotes right-wing extremism, then we're told it could be conceived as doing so. We cannot comprehend this. And honestly, that's fair. I feel like you know, it's if it's like making fun of like a really terrible person, like, is it really that bad?
I mean, it's just satirical, right? It's like a satirical cartoon. Like, I don't know.
Okay, so we've definitely talked about this one for way too long. So maybe we should talk about a different game.
The atmosphere at E3 2009 was charged with the energy of a console generation at its peak. The PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 were locked in a fierce battle for market dominance. And this was the height of where people felt like a new announcement of an exclusive game could sway this battle one way or another. And during Sony's press conference, they announced an exclusive game made by Rockstar North, the developers of Grand Theft Auto.
Today, we'd like to announce a new property coming from Rockstar North. It's called Agent, and it will be exclusive to PlayStation 3.
The reveal was simple. There was just a logo on the screen and a single word, Agent. That was gonna be the title of the game. And when it came to details, Sony did not tell us much besides this.
Agent will take a player across the globe amidst the shadowy world of espionage and assassins in the darkest hours of the late 1970s.
They did immediately set an impossibly high bar though, declaring that Sony expected Agent to have the same impact as the Grand Theft Auto series, which was a massive franchise at the time already.
You're all aware of the impact GTA had on our platforms, and we expect Agent to have the same must-have value.
But this exclusive game made by Rockstar was seen as a big, significant strategic victory for PlayStation, going against the Xbox 360. And looking back on this, nowadays it seems kinda crazy. Rockstar does not make new IPs often or at all anymore. And 2009 was already the end time of them creating new IPs, so this could have been a massive game to come out. Rockstar's co-founder Sam Houser stated, "Agent is a game that we have wanted to make for a long time, and that the title is the studio's attempt to create, quote-unquote, what we believe will be the ultimate action game." They themselves definitely tried to position this as the next big IP coming from Rockstar. And while in 2009 they tried really hard to hype up this game with multiple press statements and interviews,
The Agent, what is so exciting to you about that product? I mean, have you seen it yet, or what do you know about it?
The thing that I'm so excited about is it's from Rockstar North,
Right.
and anything they do is absolutely brilliant. And they are a platform maker.
And this is not the second string team that's doing it. I mean, these are going to be the real guys, full-fledged blockbuster game from
This
Rockstar.
is Sam Houser and company. He's excited to do it, and we're excited to have him.
Fantastic. Well, do we know anything about when that's going to come out? I mean, that's a couple years away, I assume?
No dates to be announced yet, but it is in development.
Not coming this year, right?
Not for 2009.
they even hinted in 2009 that the game could be releasing as early as 2010. But in the years that followed, the information given out stopped almost entirely. It came down to like once a year, Rockstar or the publisher Take-Two maybe referencing the game in some way. In 2010, they did say that the game is still in development and was still a PS3 exclusive, but no more details on the actual game were given. In 2011, 2 years after the initial announcement, it was stated once again that the game is in active development, but it was absent from E3 of that year. And whenever anyone at Sony was asked about Agent, they would just kind of deflect and be like, yeah, you gotta ask Rockstar about that. We don't know anything about that. I work for Sony.
Agent was shown, the Rockstar game,
Yeah.
just as a logo. Is that still out there? Is it still coming?
I think you'd have to talk to the guys at Rockstar.
And this is something that kept happening.
You couldn't have said it better when you said Agent from Rockstar.
Right.
I work for Sony Computer Entertainment. The minute I start working for Rockstar,
Yes.
I'll have some definitive information for you on Agent. But I'd suggest you interview one of those great
I should
guys.
give those guys a
Yes,
call
you
and see
should.
what's
That's what
happening.
I've said for the last 5 years, and I continue to suggest you do that.
But the non-answers about the game wouldn't stop there. By 2013, the PlayStation 4 had been announced, which led to speculation that Agent would switch development to the new generation. When Sony Worldwide Studio boss Shuhei Yoshida was asked, he delivered another very vague statement. "You are asking the wrong person. I have some knowledge, but I'm not in a position to talk about it." Which once again does not tell us anything and just kind of deflects from anything about Agent. The only real thing, like real world thing we could get at the time was in 2013 and then in 2016 when the trademark was renewed with the American government. But I mean, in hindsight, that doesn't mean anything really, and that's just something that developers do all the time for a couple years. But the people that were following this game did see this as a sign, and every time there was something as small as just the renewal of a trademark, people were like, oh, the game is not dead, and it reignited this whole sense of hope that the game was coming sooner than later. And honestly, these were the only things that kept the game alive, because Sony sure wasn't gonna talk about it, and Rockstar sure as hell wasn't gonna talk about it either. But the trademark renewal in 2016 was the last positive update we would get about the game, if you can even call that a positive update, because the next update was in 2018 when the United States Patent and Trademark Office officially updated the status of the trademark for Agent to abandoned. This meant this last sliver of update and hope that people had was also gone. But it did signal that there was no intent to release a game under that name anymore. And the very final nail in the coffin for people that were still believing in something happening with Agent came in 2021 when Rockstar quietly removed a dedicated page for Agent from its official website. At this point, it had been over 12 years since this website said coming soon. But coming soon didn't mean anything, and we never really learned officially what happened with Agent. But there was some images that were leaked, and then also there was a developer that did have a blog post up on his website for a short bit that kind of detailed that there was a bunch of development trouble behind the scenes with the game, and that the whole thing might have been too ambitious for them to realistically make, and because of that, the development kept stalling and slowing down. And allegedly half the team was working on Agent at Rockstar and half the team was working on the next GTA title. But the deeper Agent spiraled into development hell, the less it became feasible for Rockstar Rockstar to ignore the next GTA, so developers would slowly move over to GTA, before eventually any work on Agent would be stopped. And I mean, Rockstar did apparently try to move the project of Agent over to a different internal studio, but if that happened, that studio obviously never had any chance to put out a finished product either. And it is the story of Agent, which, you know, at first it did sound like a cool project, and Rockstar has made some new IPs that are really amazing, like ones they don't even make today anymore, like Bully is a great game, and I'm sure Agent would have been an interesting thing too. But with GTA being more and more popular, Rockstar was kind of maturing out of trying new franchises and solely focusing on like one or two IPs they have. And it seems like Agent kind of fell victim to that transitional period where they strayed away from introducing new stuff.
Okay, so there was another interesting game that we should talk about called Elveon, which was originally set to release on the Xbox 360, PS3, and PC. Now, the game's development, though, started all the way back in 2003, where a studio known as Tentacle Studios, which was located in Slovakia, started working on this fantasy game that has like a bunch of plot lines and world building related to elves, like fantasy elves. I don't know. Originally, it started off as like an action RPG game, but then they were like, maybe we could do some online stuff with this. That'd be kind of cool, like some multiplayer. People on Unseen 64 actually related it, saying that it's kind of reminiscent of something that like For Honor would look like, or maybe like the versus mode in Dark Souls. So maybe that can give a little bit of a vibe. But this game was apparently supposed to be really, really ambitious. And IGN used to hype this game up in the mid-2000s as something big coming up in the future. While things started off with a pretty small team at the time for a big project like this with around 40 or so developers, by 2007 it had grown to over 70 different developers. So it was like a full force big project, especially by the late 2000s. However, it seemed like backing for the game to actually release was kind of fading away, and a lot of the game's development was starting to stall out. Developers were leaving the company, and as the studio was facing development issues, things would get even more rocky. The PC release of the game would eventually end up being straight up canceled, and the studio in Slovakia would end up shutting down due to financial issues. And with that studio shutting down, the publisher stepped in because the game was still apparently at the time relatively close to being finished. So development on the rest of the game to finish up the game and get it ready for launch would be handed over to Climax Group, another game development studio that this time was located in England. All of the years working on this game, it was still likely set up to possibly see the light of day. During this transition period, it seemed like the game's focus would shift yet again, where this time the combat action RPG focus would be reduced and the game was being reworked partially to play something more like along the lines of the Legend of Zelda series. And it seemed like the whole multiplayer side of things was being scaled down drastically, as the biggest focus was now being set into the single player adventure, though there were still plans for some basic multiplayer, like one-on-ones or something like that. After all of that, nothing would come from this game again. There was like a little bit of talk around 2008 about it, and then it was it. The game kind of just vanished as far as what Climax was working on at the time. Now, at the same time that Climax was set to take things over and work on this game, they were dealing with their own financial problems as well, and they were seeing some of their studios closing down, and possibly this game just ended up being one of those victims to all of that. Back in 2008, the England location that was working on this game was the last studio remaining from Climax during a time where Climax had been closing down all of their studios. And in 2009, it seemed like Climax had landed a deal to work on a Silent Hill game for the Nintendo Wii. And maybe they just abandoned Elveon altogether. And that would appear to be the end of Elveon's story. No official dismissal of the project, but then something unexpected happened, which reignited hope that this game would possibly release. In 2015, which is quite a bit later, apparently former developers who had worked at Tentacle on the original version of Elveon actually reacquired the trademark, licenses, and assets that they had developed for Elveon, with plans to develop the game and finally get it ready for release. There was an official statement made saying that our main goal is to produce a quality action RPG game using newest technologies like Unreal Engine 4 and finish the Elveon dream, which was started 12 years ago by a small group of adventurous developers. Our focus is to use Elveon, Book of Elves trademark, and Elveon World with its specifics to bring player, whole new fantasy experience. We are taking the best from original game, dual fights, story-specific art style. This must be like a translation that someone did because this is rough. We are polishing and tweaking it to the highest possible level, adding new features, graphics, using best actual technology available. We hope to keep the Elveon trademark and world alive and bring the best game experience to players possible. So that's pretty hopeful, right? There was never an update again. That was it. Though they had a website and they abandoned the domain name, I think like in 2017, about 2 years later. So who knows? Elveon might have been something really ambitious. I think it could have been good if the game was able to be fleshed out like its original plan is, but financial woes will do that to a game. So RIP Elveon the game. I still don't think we're ever going to actually see an update on it.
So MMORPGs usually are like what, third person, like fantasy style things, right? You swing a sword, you have like a staff and stuff. And every now and then someone tries to make a first person shooter that is also an MMO, and not a lot have succeeded. I think the closest to success is Destiny.
Dude, I think I know where this is going. Are you about to talk about Huxley?
I'm about to talk about Huxley.
Oh, shoot.
Well, way before anything like Destiny was around, there was a game announced in 2005 called Huxley the Dystopia by the South Korean studio Webson. This game was supposed to be World of Warcraft with Halo-style, like, online FPS battles. This was set in a post-apocalyptic future where humanity is, like, split into two factions, and then you pick a faction, and, then you play on, like, the planet, whatever. Classic, like, dystopian stuff. It was built on Unreal Engine 3, which was relatively new at the time, so, it also looked very good for 2005. This was planned for PC and Xbox 360, and in 2009, a playable beta actually launched in Korea, and then even in the US. There was a bunch of performance issues, and also, it really wasn't that cool. Like, it didn't play that well. A couple months go by, the beta just shut down, and there was never an update again. No farewell, no nothing. It just vanished into obscurity. And that's kind of the end of Huxley. How do you know the game?
Because I forgot that you were going to cover it, so I did some research on it.
Oh, I see.
There's one thing I could add to it that I think is really interesting. Back when the game was still in development, there was a contract with the developers and publishers directly with a Chinese company called The9, and they purchased the rights to operate the game in China for $35 million. Which was considered the largest export transaction to date for a Korean-developed game. Also, I don't know why I'm sitting over here.
Yeah, I noticed. You just sat down over there.
I'm just trying to mix up the frame a little bit, you know what I mean?
We're just sitting in random spots.
I had to sit down for that. It was a big deal. Did you ever play Huxley?
Oh, I don't think I knew about this in 2005 or whenever the beta launched, 2009. It definitely wasn't it. And nobody has really been successful as a genre besides Destiny, like mixing MMOs and FPSs. There's
a couple other interesting games that are kind of relevant to this topic that we'll be covering in an upcoming video, so hang tight. Another interesting thing real quick, Huxley, like the development was so large for this game that they did like the whole soundtrack for the game wasn't like digitally composed. They had an 80-piece symphony put together, and they recorded the music for the game, which was over an hour long, with the Hollywood Studios Symphony at Warner Brothers.
I guess that's where the $35 million went.
Yeah, they immediately just put it right into the symphony.
I have a game that is still going on right now in development. It hasn't been heard of that much over the years. So let me start in 2016. In 2016, a Japanese studio called Sia Games announced a game called Project Awakening. This was a fantasy game with dragons, sword fighting, blah, blah, blah. Kind of like a Monster Hunter with Dragon's Dogma type vibe. And in 2018, they did actually reveal a gameplay trailer at E3, and it looked pretty okay. Some people were like, "Oh, this looks kind of cool," but again, it was just like an E3 gameplay trailer, right? Nothing too much. Now, in the years followed, there wasn't really any updates. Like 2018, 2019. 2020. We didn't really hear about the game until 2021 when some new footage appeared, and it was just like a tech demo for the engine they're making the game in, but it's not really gameplay. It was just like a slice that you could look at. And then years go by again, and we hear nothing until in 2024 they did say that the game is not cancelled. The company that owns the developer mentioned this as an upcoming title, but they didn't say when They just said to be announced. We don't know. I mean, and we haven't heard anything since last year either. So it sure as hell isn't coming out this year because it's already August.
Do you think it's ever going to come out?
I don't know. I mean, it literally going to its 10th year after announcement. We really don't know anything or any details that much. I mean, like, when is this going to come out? I don't think so. I don't think it's coming.
I mean, there have been a few games that have been announced in the past that were essentially Vaporware, but then randomly resurfaced years later, right? Like we had Dead Island 2, Duke Nukem Forever, and Captain Blood.
I mean, yeah, they did come out eventually.
So maybe this game will come out.
I mean, I guess we can't pass judgment, but for now, Project Awakening keeps like disappearing for years on end, and I mean, it's already been over a year and we haven't heard anything. So
what comes out first, Project Awakening, GTA 6, or Beyond Good and Evil 2?
GTA 6 coming out first, then Project Awakening, and Beyond Good and Evil 2 is never coming out.
And then Elder Scrolls 6 after that?
No, Elder Scrolls 6 is coming out.
I don't know, dude. Maybe after Beyond Good and Evil 2.
Oh, I don't know, dude. Ooh.
When I was a kid, Star Fox 64 was probably one of my favorite video games. It was one of my first games. I think it was like the first game I had on the Nintendo 64. I got a Nintendo 64 for Christmas with my brother, and Star Fox 64 was one of the games that was there. So we had it on day one. And I remember liking it because I couldn't read because I was a very little kid and had voice acting and like characters that were animals, you know, as a kid. Like, that shit's fire. Interestingly enough, though, Star Fox over the years has always kind of been like in a rocky place. Like, I don't think Star Fox ever was like doing fantastic after Star Fox 64. Every single release it would have over the years would split the community in one way or another. Even if the game was good, people still didn't like aspects of every single game that would come out later on. So like Star Fox Adventures wasn't even a Star Fox game originally, and then it was like rebranded to a Star Fox game, and they like reworked it to try to like make it fit into the Star Fox lore, but ultimately it's more like a Legend of Zelda type game made by Rare. After that game released, it was a good game, sure, but like Star Fox fans were like, it's not a Star Fox sequel. In 2002, Nintendo was like, we got you, fam. We got a new Star Fox game, and you guys can get hyped for it. And it was what eventually would become Star Fox Assault. But they announced another Star Fox game that essentially would never get talked about again. And that's caused a ton of confusion. So it's a little confusing. This poster was revealed during the initial announcement for Star Fox Assault. And it looks nothing at all like what Star Fox Assault looks like. The R-Wings are like all rounded. I don't know what's going on with Fox McCloud's face here. He's going through a rough time right now. And that was it. And it kind of advertised that Namco was going to be taking on development here. Obviously, Rare wasn't working on it. Rare just got bought by Microsoft. And Namco had like experience doing like flying shooty type games. So this could have been a pretty good partnership. But during that time, they announced another Star Fox game, sometimes referred to as Star Fox Armada or Star Fox Arcade. And this picture all the time gets paired up with this canceled Star Fox game or mysteriously disappeared Star Fox game, though I don't think they're related at all. I just think the art style in this picture is so far detached from Star Fox Assault and what that would look like that people assumed that this was for a completely different game. Now, what really happened, though, was there was a Star Fox game that ended up disappearing that was apparently, all we know, supposed to come out on arcade cabinets. This was a weird time. Nintendo was dabbling a little bit with putting some of their games in actual arcades. So F-Zero had an arcade release with this F-Zero arcade game. I think Mario Kart got one too. And at one point, a Star Fox game was announced officially, and after that, there was nothing ever from it again. But this then made me fall down a completely different rabbit hole, slightly related, because then I was like, well, what is this image of Star Fox or Star Fox Assault that was completely different from what Star Fox Assault's art style looked like? And it seemed like in 2003, for Star Fox Assault was really starting to take the form that it would by the time it would release in 2005. They did an E3 trailer for the game, and while the art style isn't fully Star Fox Assaulted yet, it is different. And I always find this footage really, really interesting because of just like how weird this gameplay is. Like, it just, there's something like uncanny about it. I don't know how to explain it. Do you want to watch the footage, Luke? I have two videos I'm gonna send you.
Okay.
I feel like the CGI in this, like, this showed off the new pointed ships. That's different from the poster. But Fox's face is just creepy. I don't know. Like, he has like eyeliner on or something.
Dude, he does have eyeliner on your.
It is. I don't know, man.
Fast and Furious.
Oh, Fast and Furious.
Fast and Furious. I think during development, they were focused more on multiplayer and not actually like the campaign. The Landmaster looks like shit. It looks like a polygon. I don't know.
Oh. What the hell?
I don't know what that is. But I don't know. I just always thought that was so weird.
How is he running?
Also, this gameplay is insane, dude. Dude, doesn't that make you horny? I mean, excited?
Yes.
This looks like such early footage, doesn't it?
Yeah, it looks very
What is he
unpolished.
throwing? Oranges?
Yeah. He's throwing tomatoes.
What's wrong with the R-Wing?
Wait a minute.
Is this from the Super Nintendo? Like... Dude, even in the trailer, they can't
Look at the
handle the
projectile.
controls.
It's just like a...
Like an orange.
Yeah. Oh, dude, that was clean up.
That was.
All right.
This guy sucks at aiming. Dude, I don't know. That stuff's goofy. I wish they would show off like super unpolished games as like a reveal trailer nowadays, because I just think it's so funny. The game ended up like looking way better when it did come out. That was just a weird rabbit hole I fell down when I was looking into Star Fox Arcade.
Another game that vanished without a trace and wasn't really heard about for years was Half-Life 2 Episode 3. Now, Half-Life 3 is another thing in itself, and I think we're going to talk about that also in a different video in the future. But let's just focus on Half-Life 2 Episode 3. In 2006, Half-Life 2 Episode 1 launches. In 2007, Episode 2 came out. At the end, there was a cliffhanger. I guess I could spoil it, right? Like,
You could spoil it is a long time ago if you haven't played Half-Life 2.
okay, good. Eli Vance dies, and then, you know, it sets up some stuff with aperture signs, blah, blah, blah. Episode 3 was definitely announced and was supposed to conclude the story, and it was suggested by Valve that this would come out in 2008. 2008 came by, and there was no updates on it. It was absent from E3 or any gaming events, and that would continue for 2009, 2010. And then in 2011, Gabe Newell said during an interview with MCV Develop magazine that they went through the episode phase, and they're now going towards shorter and even shorter cycles, which, while not specifically mentioned Half-Life 2 Episode 3, does not sound good for a release of a third episode. But we wouldn't actually know what happened until 2024, when in a 20th anniversary documentary for Half-Life 2, Gabe Newell and, you know, other Valve employees confirmed that Episode 3 would no longer be happening. But I mean, it had been almost 2 decades at that point, so I guess people could have figured that it's never coming out. But in this documentary, they also revealed that the studio had to shift focus on Left 4 Dead. They just needed heavier support on Left 4 Dead, and they decided that was what they wanted to do at the time. And obviously Left 4 Dead was pretty successful. It worked out. But after Left 4 Dead was done, they felt like the Episode 3 ideas they had were not good enough to really like make a product that they wanted to put out. I guess they didn't think they could push the bar enough, and they didn't think just concluding the story was enough. Gabe Newell actually said that this was his personal failure because he couldn't find a way to make this a cool concept or anything like that. During this documentary, they also showed some concept art, which we hadn't seen before. That was kind of the only look we've ever gotten at this pretty interesting Vaporware game, because, you know, it was obviously announced and teased, and then it just absolutely did not happen, and there was no updates really. And I mean, people wanted Half-Life 3. It was kind of overshadowed. People stopped asking for Episode 3 and started asking for Half-Life 3 eventually.
Are we going to see Half-Life 3, and when?
Well, I can't really say anything about Half-Life 3, and when I do, I'll certainly talk to the BBC about it.
So yeah, kind of forgotten too a little bit.
How wild would it be if after all of these years, Half-Life 3 doesn't get announced, but Half-Life 2 Episode 3 ends up getting announced?
That would be really crazy. Kind of funny though.
I hope that happens. Or we get like Half-Life 4 or something before Half-Life 3. Okay, if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you are subscribed to our channel. Most of the people watching this aren't subscribed, and if you subscribe, it actually helps our channel out a lot. We only have like 380,000 subscribers, something like that. It'd be cool to hit 400,000. That'd be neat. Also, huge thank you to our patrons and our YouTube members supporting us making these videos, these long form videos like this. We like you guys. And check out this other video that's being recommended to you by YouTube's algorithm. That would help us too, and you might enjoy it. So yeah, GG. Anything else, Luke?
No.
Cool. All right, we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.